Everyone thinks people who cut everyone off are weak. They think you're antisocial, broken, or running away from life. They assume isolation means loneliness, sadness, or failure. But what if the opposite is true? What if the moment someone disappears is the moment they finally wake up? What if cutting people off isn't hate, but clarity? What if silence isn't emptiness, but self-protection? That question alone makes people uncomfortable. Let me ask you something personal. Have you ever felt lighter after not replying? More calm after distancing yourself from people who drain you? If yes, then this video isn't random for you. Because the psychology of people who cut everyone off is not simple. It's not just introversion or social anxiety. It's not arrogance either. It's usually a reaction to something deeper that nobody sees. In real life, you're taught to stay connected no matter what. Answer fast. Be available. Be nice. Be understanding. Nobody teaches you how dangerous constant access can be. Nobody warns you what happens when everyone has a piece of you. Slowly, you stop hearing your own thoughts. You live in other people's expectations. You explain yourself again and again. And one day, your mind says, enough. That's when isolation begins. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly pulling back, replying less, showing up less, explaining nothing. And that's why the title matters. The psychology of people who cut everyone off isn't about cutting people. It's about cutting chaos, pressure, and emotional noise. It's about choosing peace over performance. The thumbnail line says, people who isolate themselves. Because the moment you isolate, people judge you. They don't ask what pushed you there. They only see the distance and take it personally. But isolation is rarely about others. It's usually about survival, about protecting what's left of your energy, about finally listening to yourself. This video isn't here to glorify disappearing forever, and it's not here to shame connection either. It's here to explain why some people reach that point, and what's really happening inside their mind when they do. Because once you understand this psychology, you'll stop judging yourself for needing space. You'll stop forcing connections that feel wrong, and you'll start isolating with intention, not guilt. This is only the beginning, because the real reasons people cut everyone off are tied to exhaustion, betrayal, and self-awareness. And most people never talk about them honestly. People don't cut everyone off suddenly. It's not a random decision made in one bad day. It happens after a long period of emotional exhaustion, after staying silent about things that hurt too much. At first, you tolerate behavior you shouldn't. You give chances. You explain. You forgive. You tell yourself you're being mature and understanding. But every time you do, something inside you gets tired. You answer messages when you don't have the energy. You show up even when your body wants rest. You listen to problems that aren't yours to carry. And slowly, your patience turns into pressure. The dangerous part is that nobody sees this stage. From the outside, you look fine. You're still present, still available, still reliable. But inside, you're running on empty. Psychologically, this is when isolation starts forming. Your nervous system is overloaded. Your mind is constantly alert, never calm, so it looks for the fastest way to breathe. That's when distance feels good. Not because you hate people, but because silence finally gives relief. No expectations. No explanations. No emotional weight. You stop replying as fast. You stop initiating conversations. You cancel plans without guilt. And for the first time, you feel peace. This is why people misunderstand isolation. They think you're avoiding responsibility. But in reality, you're recovering from overstimulation, from being emotionally available for too long. Most people who isolate were once very giving. They cared deeply. They stayed when they should have left. They carried more than their share. And when someone like that finally pulls away, it's not weakness. It's burnout. It's self-preservation kicking in late. The problem is, the world rewards So, when you stop, people get uncomfortable. They ask what's wrong with you? They never ask what happened to you. Isolation becomes the only place where you're not needed, not required, not expected, just allowed to exist without pressure. And that feeling is addictive. But here's the truth most people miss. Isolation isn't the goal. It's a signal, a sign that something in your life was draining you too much. And if you don't understand that, you'll either isolate forever or keep returning to the same exhaustion. Neither is healthy. This is where the psychology gets deeper, because exhaustion is only one layer. Another reason people cut everyone off is far more emotional and painful. Another powerful reason people cut everyone off is being misunderstood for too long. Not once, not twice, but repeatedly, over years. You explain yourself and people still get you wrong. You share your thoughts and they reduce you to labels. Too quiet, too serious, too emotional, too distant. Eventually, you get tired of correcting them. At first, you try harder. You speak more. You open up more. You adjust your personality to be acceptable. But the more you adjust, the less real you feel. Psychologically, this creates inner conflict. You're present, but not authentic. You're heard, but not understood. And that gap becomes painful. So one day, you stop explaining. Not out of anger, but out of resignation. You realize being silent hurts less than being misunderstood. Isolation becomes a form of emotional relief. No need to justify your choices. No need to defend your mindset. No need to convince anyone of who you are. This is why isolation feels calm to some people. They're not lonely. They're free from constant self-translation. Free from shrinking themselves to be accepted. Another layer most people ignore is awareness. People who isolate often observe more than they speak. They notice patterns in behavior. They sense intentions behind words. They see fake concern, support that disappears when you grow. Jealousy hidden inside jokes, and once you see these things, you can't unsee them. Conversations start feeling predictable. Compliments feel conditional. Connections feel shallow, and your interest fades naturally. So you pull back, not because you think you're better, but because depth matters to you. And depth is rare. Being around people without depth feels draining. Small talk feels heavy. Repetitive conversations feel empty. So solitude feels richer by comparison. This is where people judge you incorrectly. They say you've changed. They say you've become distant. They don't realize awareness creates distance naturally. Isolation isn't always sadness. Sometimes it's clarity. Sometimes it's emotional intelligence. Sometimes it's knowing when not to engage. But misunderstanding and awareness are still not the deepest reasons. There's something that cuts even deeper. Something that permanently changes how you see people, and that is betrayal. For many people, isolation begins after betrayal. Not small disappointment, but deep, personal betrayal. The kind that changes how you trust forever. You trusted someone fully. You opened up without filters. You believed they were safe, and they proved you wrong. Psychologically, betrayal rewires your brain. Your mind connects closeness with danger. It learns that vulnerability can be used against you, so it starts protecting you in extreme ways. You become cautious. You share less. You test people without realizing it. And slowly, you withdraw completely. If you liked our video and found it relatable, then subscribe to our channel and be the part of our journey. Isolation becomes control. If nobody's close, nobody can hurt you. If nobody knows you deeply, nobody can betray you. That logic feels safe, even if it's painful. This is why people who isolate often look cold, but inside, they're hyper-aware. Every interaction feels risky. Every connection feels like a potential threat. The worst part is, isolation works. You feel calmer, more in control, less exposed. But safety and fulfillment are not the same. And deep down, you know that you miss connection. You just don't miss disappointment. This creates an inner conflict. You want closeness, but you fear repeating the same pain. So, you stay distant, even when you don't want to. Many people never talk about this stage, because admitting it feels weak. It feels like you didn't move on. But psychologically, you did adapt. Isolation becomes a coping strategy, not a lifestyle choice, not a personality trait, a response to emotional injury. This is also why advice like just trust again feels insulting. Trust isn't a switch. It's rebuilt, slowly, or not at all. And forcing it makes things worse. People who isolate after betrayal don't hate people. They hate repeating pain. They hate being naive again. They hate losing themselves in someone else. But here's something important. Not all isolation comes from pain. Some of it comes from growth. And that changes everything. Sometimes people isolate not because they're hurt, but because they're changing. Their mindset shifts. Their priorities evolve. When this happens, distance becomes necessary. Not forever. Just long enough to hear your own thoughts. Just long enough to realign. Growth is uncomfortable for people around you. They prefer the old version of you. The predictable one. The one who fit their expectations. So when you start changing, they question you. They joke about it. They try to pull you back. Psychologically, isolation protects your transformation. It creates space to grow without interference, without opinions, without pressure to stay the same. This is why many breakthroughs happen in silence. People disappear before they level up. They retreat before they rise, not to hide, but to build. During this phase, you become more self-aware. You reflect more. You observe your patterns. You face parts of yourself you used to ignore. And with self-awareness comes selectiveness. You stop craving constant company. You stop seeking approval. You stop tolerating low-effort connections. When you finally re-enter social spaces, things feel different. Noise feels louder. Shallow interactions feel heavier. People notice the change. They say you've become distant. They say you've become cold. But what they really sensing is boundaries. Isolation teaches you something powerful. Your peace is fragile. Your energy is valuable. Not everyone deserves access, but here's the danger. Isolation can become too comfortable. You start avoiding instead of choosing, and growth turns into hiding. That's why intention matters. Healthy isolation has direction. Unhealthy isolation has fear, and only you can tell the difference. Some people stay isolated longer than needed, not because they're healing, but because they're scared to re-engage. That's when isolation stops helping. Understanding this line is crucial, because isolation should sharpen you, not shrink you, not disconnect you from life. There's still one more side to this psychology. One that most people never admit. One that decides whether isolation saves you or traps you. After enough time alone, something shifts inside you. You stop craving attention. You stop chasing conversations that go nowhere. Silence no longer feels empty. Psychologically, this is where isolation changes your standards. You become selective without trying. You feel discomfort around forced energy. You trust your intuition more than words. This is when people start saying you're different. Not because you're arrogant, but because you no longer over-explain. You no longer negotiate your boundaries. You walk away without drama. You don't argue. You don't prove your point. You simply remove yourself. And that scares people, because silence is hard to control. Distance removes leverage, and healed people are unpredictable. But here's the part most isolated people don't expect. When you stay alone too long, reconnection feels unfamiliar, almost uncomfortably. You start noticing flaws faster. You lose patience quicker. You feel irritated by things you once ignored. That's not superiority. That is a recalibration. The danger is confusing peace with avoidance, avoiding difficult conversations, avoiding vulnerability, avoiding emotional risk altogether. Isolation was meant to reset you, not erase your need for connection, not harden you permanently, not turn you numb. Some people stay isolated because it's safer, but safety without connection slowly becomes emptiness. You function, but you don't feel fully alive. This is the crossroads. Return with boundaries, or remain distant, out of fear. Only one leads to growth. Healthy isolation teaches you discernment, not withdrawal. It teaches you who deserves access, not to shut the door on everyone. The strongest people aren't always alone. They just know when to step back and when to step forward. That balance is rare. There's only one thing left to understand, the core lesson behind cutting everyone off. The truth that ties all of this together. And that's where this ends. People who cut everyone off are not broken. They're often overwhelmed, aware, or healing. They reached a point where silence felt safer than noise, where distance felt better than pretending. Isolation is not the enemy. Unconscious isolation is. When you isolate with intention, it sharpens you. When you isolate with fear, it slowly shrinks you. The lesson is not to disappear forever, and it's not to stay constantly available either. The lesson is to choose connection wisely, to let people earn access to you. You don't need many people. You need the right ones, the ones who don't drain you, the ones who don't require a performance. If this video felt personal, that's not a coincidence. It means you've been there, or you're there now. And that awareness already puts you ahead. Take a moment and reflect. Are you isolating to protect your peace, or to avoid pain you haven't faced yet? Your answer matters more than any advice. If this resonated, write your thoughts below, not for others. For yourself. Clarity comes when you put things into words. Like the video, if it gave you perspective. Subscribe if you want more psychology that speaks to real life, not motivation that fades, but understanding that stays. And remember this, you don't owe everyone access to your energy, but you also don't need to disappear to be strong. True power is knowing when to step back and when to return.